Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I really don't know when you are going to watch this short video clip, which is meant to help you with understanding some core concepts related to humanism and constructivism. You know that we have already been discussing some aspects of humanism. We went over Abraham Maslow's and Erik Erikson's ideas, right, which have contributed a lot to understanding learning and understanding what goes on with people emotionally when they learn. And that helps, of course, teachers to develop a better plan, a better course of action when, let's say, designing their own lessons. Well, humanism and constructivism, in fact, are closely related one with the other. You know that language learning and teaching have a social nature because there is a social nature in language in itself. Perhaps we can say about Carl Rogers that he regards humans as, let's say, entities that have a natural potential for learning. So there is a natural desire and there is a possible way to learn in every single person. Now, perhaps he has the idea that we have to find people's natural potential and help them discover this. Now, personal meaning is a must. That is to say, when learning, if the contents that you devise are relevant to the students, then they will be involved emotionally. And that's why this will be, let's say, effective, right, and long-lasting or longer-lasting. So when we say involving students, we also say active participation. That is to say, the idea of experiential learning is present not only in Carl Rogers, but in all constructivist supporters. Well, there is a close bond between cognition and feelings. That is to say, when they are combined in a learning, let's say, situation, then they make this learning memorable. And memorable means pervasive, that is going to, let's say, last. Why not lifelong? Now, Carl Rogers also, let's say, devises ideas such as independence, right? That there should be individual moments in which the students, let's say, can work on their own and are left to be working on their own. There should be room for creativity. Self-reliance should be boosted by giving the students, let's say, responsibility and independence. Criticism should be reduced to the minimum or to be avoided, right? If it's not going to help, in fact, we change the word from criticism to feedback. Learning how to learn is something we should inspect. And that is to say, we need to raise awareness in the learners on how they learn. Activate this meta-analysis of what learning is and how they carry it out. Self-evaluation is also a new concept. Well, in fact, evaluation or assessment, it should not only be in the hands of the teacher, it could be also a peer co-evaluation. And let's say self-evaluation should be a kind of discussion, right, and analysis between the teacher and the learner. Well, social interactionism in general lines deals with this cognitive involvement in learning, when learners make sense of what happens, right, all around themselves. And in fact, this input that they receive, okay, should somehow reflect or mirror a kind of personal meaning, right? And this emotional element that takes place when meaning happens and it is personal, then gives significance. And that is, let's say, a core idea in social interactionism. Now, what about the educational implications of humanism? Well, we can say that the implications perhaps is the advent of social interactionism, with many ideas that somehow renovate and give a fresh air to those of humanism. But we can say that we may, let's say, include social interactionism as a kind of evolution of humanism. Now, key concepts for humanism: personal identity and development, realistic future goals. So there should be a meaning for me in the future, so that I feel like doing things related to schoolwork or university, or learning any kind of job, right? Or guild, why not? Differentiation and personalized learning. And what is differentiation? It means that the teacher allows the fact that every single student will not be the same, and that they, let's say, they are worth paying attention, giving personalized feedback. The students should feel that there is some room for choice in the classroom. And this means independence somehow. And when we think about individual and group learning, we think about cooperation and collaboration. And well, in fact, when you work in a group, there is freedom and responsibility playing a part. So it should not be misunderstood, the fact that the students are given choice. Choice means responsibility, right? And that is something they have to work together with the teacher from a very young age. Well, talking about Vygotsky, we have also to develop some ideas of Feuerstein, but we can say that children learn by exploring the environment. This is the Vygotsky's idea, which in fact much resembles that of Piaget. Adults are responsible for shaping learning. And again, here we see a coincidence with what Piaget stated. Now, Vygotsky delves into this concept that language not only communicates, but also transmits culture. It makes it possible for thinking to develop. So it is because we use language, language helps us organize our ideas, and we grow cognitively. We enhance, let's say, knowledge, we expand it. Now, interaction and communication, right? Both as a unit. This is done by means of language, which also includes signs and symbols. So language is not just words. Learning happens when it is meaning focused. That's to say, there should be clear goals and visible, tangible ones. So we have to think about short-term and long-term goals. Why not? Now, when we say that Vygotsky regards the learning in itself holistically, that is to say, he believes that the intervention of the more knowledgeable person should not interfere with what we mean to teach as to simplify it or to separate it or break it into units, right? Or areas, right? But, well, in fact, this is arguable, right? Because for the sake of organization and for the sake of, let's say, assessment, sometimes we tend to do this, right? Teachers tend to break down contents into units, into, let's say, competencies, right? Or even goals. Well, the zone of proximal development, I found this graphic that perhaps it helps you understand what the ZPD is. In the ZPD, you will find somebody, the learner, right, in interaction with some other knowledgeable, more knowledgeable person. That it may be one or there may be two. When we talk about this more knowledgeable person, we can refer to a peer, or we can refer to parents, or we can refer to any adult or the teacher, him or herself. Now, there are like layers, right? And in the zone of proximal development, the learner encounters what? Skills or tasks that may be too difficult for him or her to do on her own, but if guided by and encouraged, of course, by a more knowledgeable person, right, he is going to be able to, let's say, understand, embrace, use, and why not expand the skills or the contents that are, let's say, cited in this zone of proximal development. Now, what is the teacher's job? The teacher's job is to create the learning environment. And when we think about the language classroom, we think about, let's say, materials. We think about the contextualization. We think about, well, and when I say materials, I'm not just referring to the textbook, but the choice of pictures we're going to show the students, the type of language we are going to use, the examples, the way we are going to write on the board. All those factors play a part in creating a learning environment that, let's say, is feasible for learning, for embracing something new, for accommodating, for adapting to new knowledge. Remember that we have talked about assimilating, accommodating, and that is equilibration, right? The idea in zone of proximal development of all these, let's say, in fact, is clear. Now, it is this more knowledgeable one that has to pedagogically intervene all these variables to make it possible for the learner. Now, we have like two different layers, and perhaps you see here in a lighter way what is known, the ZPD, and what is not known, right? So then we are moving forward. This, right, this that is in the zone of proximal development, then will become something that is known. If the teacher, let's say, in a way displays a course of action where there is practice, where there is consolidation, where there is assessment, always based on interaction. So I wrote here something that was important, and I didn't want to forget to mention the fact that the learning environment gives a setting to this interplay between the teacher, the learners, and the tasks. And remember that we spoke about the settings and how the context influences the, let's say, the learning in itself. Because perhaps when we talk about the learning environment, we can think about the classroom, but remember Trisho's ideas. Now, when we think about the context, we may even include the emotional environment, that of, let's say, fostering trust, developing a sense of belonging. Why not the physical environment, if the classroom is well lit, right? If it is lively because there are posters, there are colors, if the students are invited to decorate the walls, the social environment, that may be the school, the institution where you work, and where and the system, the educational system this place is immersed in, and the political environment that in fact has to do with political policies that have to do with education, perhaps beliefs, and well, the cultural setting, the culture we belong to, much in a way reshapes the learning inside the classroom. So we are vulnerable to all these factors. And before we round up, Feuerstein was from Israel, and in fact he was a psychologist and educator that was in charge of planning schools after the Second World War. And well, in a way, there are many important ideas he came out with, and he believed that anybody could become an effective learner. The fact that there is a structural cognitive, let's say, basis in all of us means that this is possible. But he spoke about the modifiability. And what is that? That runs counter to the ideas of cognitivism, that we are fixed in terms of age and intelligence quotients, that there isn't much we can do to revert, let's say, learning problems. In fact, he believes that everybody is capable of learning in different ways. Teaching people how to learn, again, this idea pervades in social interactionism, constructivism, and humanism. Dynamic assessment that has to do, and this is an idea that, let's say, we generally apply, that is that of process-focused assessment. That is to say, we do not just see the results, but the processes that the students or the learners show as they move on to new knowledge, right? That is to say, thinking about the ZPD as we observe how they, let's say, move on to the zone of proximal development, or how they move out from it, and they are ready for something new. Learning independently and cooperatively, that is a concept we have already mentioned. The fundamental role of the mediator. And this could be a bit, let's say, different from Vygotsky's ideas, because he gives a lot of importance to this role of the mediator, and perhaps he's the one that has to organize and show and teach learners the best way they can learn. So it's perhaps this room for discovery is a bit more limited than in Vygotsky's proposal. Creativity, that is, let's say, something we should discover and enhance in class. Self-reliance, that is to say, well, this is on me, I am responsible, and then I have to show that I can do it. Again, minimum or no criticism, that instead of thinking about criticism, we should be thinking about feedback. learning how to learn, those ideas that even Brunner mentioned that are important to study and scrutinize. Why not? Why? Because, well, by sharing some others' ways of learning, we may incorporate new networks to make our own our own learning more effective. And of course, self-evaluation that we have already mentioned. Well, you will see that many of the ideas are repeated. And this is so because we are within the same, let's say, paradigm, in fact. And I hope that this presentation has helped you. Well, see you next week.